things go wrong as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high, and you want to smile but you have to sigh, when care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must but do not ever quit. Success is a failure turned inside out. Let's talk and clear the clouds of doubt.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Our dear respected viewers, welcome to another episode of Let's Talk. I'm your moderator, Omar Dunlap. And as always, we have with us our beloved brother Idris Tawfiq. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
And we have our very beautiful and handsome audience. Assalamu alaikum. What we'll be discussing today, insha'Allah, is the topic of Islam and the West. The relationship between Islam and the West. But before we get into that, we're going to give Brother Idris 10 minutes to just speak to our hearts. So I hope that we're ready to be open-minded and receive what the beautiful thing that Brother Idris has prepared for us today, insha'Allah.
Insha'Allah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala ashraf al-mursaleen Sayyid Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Wa salamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most compassionate, all praise be to Allah, the Lord of the worlds. Peace and blessings of Allah be upon His final messenger Muhammad, and may the peace and the blessings and the mercy of Allah be upon all of you who are watching this program. Our program's called Let's Talk. And that's what we do. We're talking about Islam and our lives. Everything to do with life and everything to do with Islam. And since we're talking about Islam in the West, I imagine that some of the things that might come up in the program today are the language we use. The language we use talking to people in the West. The language that people in the West use to talk about Islam. So language is very, very important. I want to give you a little story that taught me something very important about the kind of language we use. When I was first at university, a lifetime ago, a long, long time ago, the first holiday came up. I was studying in England, and a group of students went on holiday to Italy. Now, we'd never been abroad before, so we said this was a great adventure. We set off and we travelled all around Italy. We were at Rome and Naples and Florence. And then we were in Milan on the Sunday. Now, we were all Christians, we were all Roman Catholics, so it was a Sunday. We needed to find somewhere to go to church, to go to Mass on Sunday. So being in Milan there's this magnificent Gothic cathedral. So we went to the religious service, to Mass, on the Sunday in Milan Cathedral. And that experience of Milan Cathedral has stayed with me all my life. Because I went into the cathedral and sat down, and the service began in Italian. And it came time for the sermon, for the speech. And the priest came along and went up into the pulpit, and I can see him now. I've this image of this very big man, dressed in white with jewels gleaming. And he went up into the pulpit and started to talk. Now, of course, his speech was in Italian. Now, I didn't understand any Italian, so I just sort of started looking around the cathedral to pass the time, looking at the different things. And I realized very soon, after a minute or two, that I didn't understand what he was saying. But no one in the cathedral understood what he was saying either. Because even though they were Italians, he was talking in that religious language that professional religious people use, that ordinary people don't speak in. And it was as if he was just standing there in the pulpit going, wah, 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 and no one knew what he was talking about. And I learned a lesson then, long, long ago, that if I was ever going to talk to people about faith, I must talk to them in a language they understand. I don't just mean their own language, English or Arabic or Italian. I mean the language that people use. So I'll move that example now from Milan, and we'll take it to any mosque on a Friday. You know, now, I don't mean this to be controversial at all, but, you know, I go to the mosque on a Friday, and the area where I live, many young men come, and they're very tired. They're coming in tired from where they've been working very hard. It's not a holiday for them, and it's very hot. And they've come along to pray and to worship Allah, and they sit down, and I can see them, you know. And now, my Arabic is still not perfect. I get half of the khutbah, but I don't get all of it. So I don't understand everything. And sometimes, you know, I can see people around the mosque, and I can see on many of their faces that they too, even though they're Arabic, they don't know what's being said. Because what's being talked about, and I intend no offence, you know, they're being told how to do this properly, or how to do that properly, or how to enter the room properly. And I look at myself at these boys and think, these young men have come here today. They want to know how to find a pious wife. They want to know how to deal with employers who are unjust to them. They want to deal with policemen who may not be kind to them. This is what they're looking for. They're looking for their hearts to be fed. The week is very busy, and they've come for rest in the mosque and to worship Allah Almighty. And, you know, we're letting them down. And my thought is this, you know, young people, looking at these wonderful young people here, young people have got big hearts. And young people want to do great things for Allah. Good Muslims want to do good things for Allah. And the problem is, my dear brothers and sisters, I think that as adults, we're letting our young people down. And you know, groups come along to young people like this, and they say, you want to do great things for Allah, come with us, come off and we'll do this and we'll fight these people that are harming Islam. And they rob our young people from us and even get them to do things that are wrong in the name of Islam and to harm themselves and other people. And you know, we could blame many people for what's called terrorism in the West. This is a big problem, and it's what people talk about. We can blame many people, but I'm a great believer, you know, when there's a problem, instead of blaming someone else, ask, what am I doing? What am I doing? And I think, you know, as adults, as Muslims, often all we're giving our young people is a very lukewarm faith that wouldn't set fire to a match, whereas Islam should set people's hearts on fire. And we're letting them down. We're giving them a faith that isn't... we're not giving good example to our young people. You know, we're not praying, or if we're praying, we're not praying with all our hearts so that our faces are glowing with Islam. Instead, we're giving them something that it really doesn't matter at all. So, my words are very simple. They're to do with language and to do with example. And they're to do with every day. There's a Greek philosopher, Socrates, and he always used to say, the unexamined life is not worth living. And I think that every day as Muslims, we're given a great privilege. We're given the chance to reflect on life 5 times a day. 5 times a day, our foreheads touch the ground. And we beg Almighty Allah to help us in life, and we praise and worship Him. Blessed be He. And you know, in life we can fool many people. We can fool other people, we can fool even ourselves sometimes, but we can't fool Allah. He is not to be fooled. So I would say, when we're praying today, tomorrow, we ask Allah Almighty, what sort of example have I been to Muslim young people? And what can I do to set the world on fire with the beautiful message of Islam that would transform the West? If only we lived as Muslims, how the nations of the West would sit up and listen to us. But because as Muslims we've been asleep for so many years, we don't deserve to be listened to. It may be a harsh thought, but I think it's a very true one.
Well, let me say, and I'm sure that I'm speaking on behalf of others, Brother Idris, that you really just touched my heart, really.
Allah.
This was a very nice thing that you said, and very poignant.
Thank you.
Because when I was in America, Sometimes they would invite me as a guest speaker at a mosque, maybe to give the English khutbah, because they divide it into sections there, and I would try to do exactly what you're saying. Not another khutbah about how to make wudu. If we're Muslims, born Muslims, and we don't know how to make wudu yet, then we've got bigger problems than I think. We need to talk to the hearts, exactly like you said, and I tried to do that. And I would have young people, 18 years old, 19, 20, come up to me and say, "You're what I want. Exactly what you're saying, this is what I want." And I'm sure that you've had similar experiences. So, mashallah. And I wish we had more time to talk about this particular point, but we got to go to a break right now.
Maybe another program on this.
Inshallah. This is what I'm hoping. We're going to go to a break right now. We're going to come right back, and we're going to watch some. We asked some people off the street some questions about Islam in the West, and we'll also take some questions from our audience, inshallah. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Assalamu alaikum.
Earth, the human heart, greed, exploitation, hatred, all diseases of the heart. For the cure, join Huda TV every Sunday at 20 GMT for Moments for the Heart.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to our show, Let's Talk, where the episode today is about Islam and the West, the relationship between the Muslim world and the Western world. We're going to go very quick to some questions that we asked, just random people off the street. We brought them in, asked them questions about the relationship between Islam and the West. Brother Idris, if you could refresh my memory. The question we asked them
was, what do people in the West think about Islam?
What do people in the West think about Islam? And we're going to see their answers, inshallah ta'ala.
In this episode of Let's Talk, we're talking about Islam and the West. Now, can I ask you, Dr. Atif, in your opinion, as an ordinary Muslim, what do you think people in the West think about Islam?
Actually, they hear about Islam. They don't hear, actually. They see how Muslims behave. And that's what they gives them bad image about Islam, because they see Muslims, they see how Muslims behave, how Muslims do, how Muslims lie, how Muslims don't keep their words. So this is the image reaches them about Islam. But
do you mean Muslims in the street, or you mean Muslims on the TV?
In streets, of course. In streets.
I see.
How they behave. So, please.
So, well, what about a country, for example, where there are no Muslims? What do you think people think? Say there are no Muslims in the land. What do people in those countries think about Islam?
It depends on the TV, on the media, how they see, what they see in the media, and the TV, and the radio, and newspapers, how they hear about Islam. They hear bad image. Everything they hear and listen, they give them bad image about Islam. And this is what we have to change, depending on the media, how to reach the real image about Islam to these people through the media.
That's my next question. How can we then, as Muslims, how can we change their image? What can we do?
What we can do is like exactly what we are doing now. If we are trying to reach these people by their tongue, how is to give them the real image or the real idea about Islam. This is the best thing. But through media, through TV, newspapers, everything.
Inshallah.
They were still behind and not as good as them. That's what I think.
Okay. Where do you think they get that idea from?
Through the terrorism that's happening. And because of all Muslim countries, they're still behind.
They have a really bad image of Islam. And that's not right. And we're not still behind, but we're behind because we're not following the right traditions for Islam.
Okay, so where do you think they get this bad image from? Where does it come from?
undeveloped countries, they're not doing the right thing for Islam. So they see it's not common sense, it's not the right religion that we should follow.
Okay, because it's kind of backward.
Yeah.
I think Islam is backward.
No, it's not. But we're not following the right message.
I see, okay. So if we lived as good Muslims,
Yeah.
people would have a different image of Islam
Of course.
altogether.
Well, we can talk about all people in the West and how they think about Islam, because Islam is different from one to one. I mean, what the media put in their minds, that gives them the idea about Islam.
MashaAllah, those were very interesting answers, Brother Idris. What are your thoughts on what we just heard?
Bismillah. Well, I think the thing that comes out most of all is that these Muslims living in the land of Islam are quite convinced that the problem is coming from the Muslim countries. They seem to be saying we are giving the image of being backward, we're not living as good Muslims, we're not giving good example, which is very interesting.
Yes.
I think that there's more to it than that, a lot more to it, but there's certainly truth in that's certainly a part of the answer.
Perhaps we could say that's one of the more important
Well, it's very important,
aspects of,
absolutely.
of
There is
all
another
issues.
part. There is another part, but I wonder if our fantastic audience will pick up on some of the things.
Okay, do you guys have any questions for us today?
Yeah.
Go
I
ahead,
want
brother.
to say, what is the difference between the circumstances in the West towards Muslims before and after the September event?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. September the 11th, of course, was we could call it a watershed. Things really changed then. But, let's be honest. There's been a long history of the West and Islam, and if we look back, it goes back not just to September the 11th. It goes back centuries. We can look back if we look at the Crusades, for example. Crusader knights came back from the East with stories of murdering Turks and infidels and non-believers and all sorts of stories. And this that started in the Middle Ages has gone through time, and it's grown and grown and grown, and these Arabs and Muslims and Moors in southern Spain, images that have been created through history, have built up. It's built up. But then I think another very important thing is that there are mischief makers who have deliberately created animosity and deliberately sowed seeds in people's minds that Islam is a threat. And of course, there were political reasons after September the 11th, let's be honest, where some people in some countries were looking for a demon, were looking for someone to blame, were looking for someone to attack and invade, and Islam seemed to fit the bill. So I think September the 11th, yes, it is a watershed in relations between Islam and the West. But maybe we'll pursue it a bit more in more questions.
Inshallah. So do we have another question from our audience?
Okay, there was a question, not a question, saying that somebody visited the West and found that there is Islam without Muslims, but here there are Muslims without Islam. What do you think of this?
Well, in fact, brother, I think you've been watching one of our other programs.
Right, we mentioned
because
that.
this is mentioned on another of Let's Talk programs. And we said, to a certain extent, in the Western countries, you find many of the Islamic values, even though the people aren't Muslim. You find that they are professional, that they're on time, that they're hard-working, many of these good Muslim values. And to be honest, you visit some Muslim lands and you find whether that isn't the case. But as in the other program, we discussed why that might be so, why many of the Muslim lands might be backward, which indeed they are. And, we have to lay it squarely at the door, I think, of colonialism, of countries coming. For example, think of countries in Africa. Missionaries came from the West, alleging to bring a message of hope and love, but really the only reason they were there was to steal the material from the people of Africa And then once they'd stolen everything from them, they left them on their own. You know, we don't want to offend any Belgian viewers, but when the Belgians left the Congo, I think there were 3 doctors in the whole Congo, the size of Europe. So let's call a spade and be honest and say that a lot of the backwardness was caused deliberately by countries from Europe and the Americas. So there's good and bad. Let's not be critical completely, though. There are wonderful things in the West, wonderful things, good things that we aspire to. But equally, the message of Islam is, you see, I think the two can enrich one another. There's no clash of civilizations. The two can enrich one another. There are things that we in the Muslim lands lack. But there are things in the West that they desperately lack too. You know, it seems to me that they've lost their way. And the message of Islam is a straight way being offered to the West. An example would be, for example, in America, where you're from, Omar. I'd love an American man to come to Cairo and see boys your age holding your dad's hand crossing the road. You know? Americans would love these sort of family values and respect for older people. They'd love it, but it's gone in the United States. It's gone. It's gone in the country where I'm from. In Britain, people would love that. So Islam has many values to offer the West. Respect for women. You know, people completely misunderstand Islam's notion of it's totally distorted. We hold women in the highest regard in Islam. You know, the role of children, the role of the elderly. There's so much we can offer. And then the place of Almighty God, Allah, in society is something we can offer too.
MashaAllah. Do we have any other questions from our audience?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead, brother.
I have a comment. To be able to change the bad image which they mentioned, we have a saying which says, if Allah is with you, who is against you? Mm-hmm. And if Allah is against you, who is with you? Mm-hmm. So I think we have to be Allah all the time, throughout our life, to be able to change this bad image. Allah Almighty says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُدَافِعُ عَنِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Thanks.
I think this brother should come up here.
Right.
And
be our guest.
You're absolutely right. You know, unless Allah is at the center of things, we don't want to hear people criticizing the West and because we are the ones. Again, I said in another program, when you point fingers at people, there's one finger pointing at you, and there are 3 fingers pointing back at me. You know, we should always examine ourselves first. And instead of criticizing, and this is happening, and this, what am I doing? You know, am I living, is my life such a good example? Or am I just saying, why isn't he doing that? Why doesn't he do this? Well, let's ask ourselves, let's sort our own house out first. And I think, as I said earlier on, if we lived as Muslims, if we really lived as, I mean, we don't even get up in the morning to pray. And we call ourselves Muslims, and we talk about calling people to Islam. We miss Salat al-Fajr. We spend time in the mall and we hear the adhan and say, oh, we can pray later on, it's okay. You know, we stay out at night when our parents have told us be back by 10, and we say, oh, we'll stay, it's okay, even though they're worried about us. You know, we should live as Muslims. And if we lived as Muslims, we deserve to be listened to. But if we don't live as Muslims, these people can do whatever they want, really, because we don't deserve their respect.
Do we have any other questions or comments, concerns? Go ahead, brother.
I think that the people of the West are thinking in their materialism. So I can't imagine, I can't understand how can they live without any spiritual aspect for their life.
Who says they're living? The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that the likeness of the one who remembers Allah and who doesn't remember Allah is the likeness between the living and the dead. Who said they're living? This is my take. Maybe Brother Idris.
Well, Bismillah, the way I'd put it would be, you see, in another program, we were talking about hearts yearning for God, yearning for Allah Himself. And it seems to me that in many countries, people, you know, they're thirsting for God, but since no one has ever told them about God, God's name is never mentioned. Here in the land of Islam, we hear His name called out at least 5 times a day. We hear His name on the television. We greet one another with Assalamu alaikum. We enter rooms, Bismillah Rahman Rahim. We do things, Insha'Allah. The name of Allah is on our lips. and on our ears all the time. In many countries, in Europe and North America, people would never hear the name of God mentioned from one week to the next.
That's right.
This is very sad.
Yeah.
And so even though their hearts are thirsting for God, for Allah, they fill that thirst with all sorts of nonsense. They fill it with drink and with drugs and with shopping and with football, violence, many things. And it seems to me that these people, they're not after drink or violence or more shoes or a bigger car. What they're thirsting for is Allah Almighty, but no one has told them about Him. And it's incumbent upon us as Muslims to tell them, my dear friend, it's not shoes you want. You're really thirsting for Allah. What a surprise that would be to them. But it's true. And we've a duty to tell people about Islam. People in the West, have we a moment or two left?
We have about 2 minutes.
People in the West. I was in the United States twice this year on speaking tours. And I was really impressed. I said to myself, these are good people. These are honest, hard-working, kind people. They're God-fearing people, some of them. But what they're hearing on the television about Islam, I watched it and I was open-mouthed. I said, how on earth are they saying things like that? It isn't true. So we can't blame many of these people for the lies they're being fed. They're being told untruths about Islam, and so they believe what they're being told. And it's for us as Muslims. There are powerful forces in this world that control the media in many countries. In America, for sure, there is one group that controls the media, and that group is not fond of Islam. And so ordinary good American people are hearing stories, and they need to meet Muslims like you and I and just say to them, look, I'm just an ordinary man. I go out to work each day to feed my kids. I'm not a crazy fanatic terrorist. I'm just an ordinary man. I pray 5 times a day and I teach my kids about God. Similarly, many of these people, they're good people. They're honest, hard-working people. We need to talk to each other rather than just talk at each other.
MashaAllah.
And by knowing each other, because Allah made us into nations and tribes. Why? That ye may know each other. We're different. It shouldn't be a threat. It's a blessing. It's an enriching of our world. And Islam is the greatest enrichment of all.
You know, what you said, it reminds me of something that happened to a Muslim in my town in America, where I came from. He's a doctor and he has a very nice house. He owns his own practice. And he wrote Allahu Akbar at the top of his house. And his neighbors sued him. They said, we want you to take this down. We don't want our kids seeing that. We don't know what it means. And so in court, he said, when they brought him up to testify, and he said, all it means is God is great. And I want to see a hands raise of all the people in the audience who don't think their God is great. And of course they just sat there.
Yes.
Because they didn't understand, they didn't have that sort of knowledge that he's just a normal person that believes in God, and that he believes his God is all-powerful. But he told me that after that, he invited all of them over for dinner. After the trial and everything was settled, he invited them all over for dinner, and they apologized, and they're all good friends now, just from his good character and just being a normal person, really.
A misunderstanding.
Right.
Because we fear that which we don't understand, often. There's something we don't know, often we're afraid of it.
Right.
So we need to find ways, gentle ways, not big ways, of letting people see that we're good, honest, hard-working, kind, sincere men and women wanting to serve Almighty God. If they want us to say Almighty God instead of Allah, we can start that way. We've no problem. We worship Almighty God. There is one God and we worship Him. So do you.
That's right. Well, that's all the time we have for this segment, but don't go away just yet. We have a very special guest that's going to be with us insha'Allah ta'ala. We'll have a discussion with him, and we still have yet to read emails, which we will do towards the end of the show, inshallah. So we're going to take a short break, but we'll be right back. Assalamu alaikum.
The true life of the Muslim starts at death. If you wish to enhance your knowledge of the Islamic perspective on the hereafter, this life doesn't go on forever, but we do so little to prepare for it because most of us don't know what happens after this life ends. If you want to be amongst those who know, then join us every Saturday at 1930 GMT for the inevitable journey.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to our show, Let's Talk. I'm your moderator, Omar Dunlap. And of course, as always, we have with us my favorite brother, Idris Tawfiq. Would you like to introduce our guest?
It'd be my pleasure. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We are honored today to have with us a man who is no stranger to television, no stranger to the halls of the great and the good, Dr. Muhammad Shahat-Gindi. He is the Secretary General of the Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs in Egypt. And Doctor, I must say, as we say in Egypt, Sharafna. Manawar, you honor us, you bring light to our studio by coming today. We're really delighted to have you here.
Thank you very much. And that is, in fact, a good word, this, for Egypt. And before that, for Islam, because, alhamdulillah, you started with Islam in the name of Allah, and the blessing and peace of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So inshallah we shall start with
inshallah.
topic.
I wonder if first though, just before we talk about Clash of Civilizations, you could just tell us very briefly what is your job as Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Islamic Affairs, in case some of the viewers all over the world don't understand what that is.
Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs, in fact, introduce Islam whether inside Egypt, Muslim countries, as well as also in the West, I mean European countries and other countries.
Yes.
So that is the mission of Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs. We try to introduce Islam, we try to follow the developments about Islam and about many things. And as you know, in fact, many developments now happen. Maybe something against Islam, maybe other people accuse Islam. So we are interested in to follow this kind of these accusations, to deal with these accusations. How can we behave? How can we make this kind of definition of Islam nowadays, particularly because if we want to introduce Islam according to what we introduced Islam before, I think the matter is different now, because many things now are changed. Also people, they changed.
The world is changing all the time.
The world is changing, of course. Even Muslims themselves also.
Yes. So can we then go straight to the point and ask you, from your position in the Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs, this notion of there being a clash of civilizations between Islam and the West, it seems to me mischief makers come up with this claim. What is your response to this idea of a clash between Islam and the West?
Islam, in fact, I know, does not know this kind of clash. But as Western scholars, like Mr. Huntington, I think that is his call about this, and I think that's kind of pretendence about Islam, because Islam recognize others. Muslims must, I mean true Muslim, must believe in Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and so on. So why we make this kind of clash between religions, between civilizations, between cultures? But anyhow, maybe after the end of communism, and it is disappeared, as we know, and that is red danger. They saw now we will make another kind of clash with Muslims, and particularly with Islam, with Quran, and with Muslims, because that's kind of green danger to Europe, to West. And that's kind of politics, I think so.
So what about the link that these people make? These people make a link between Islam and Arab. They kind of claim that Islam and Arab are the same, and there is a threat from the Arab world and from terrorism. How do we answer that?
As a matter of fact, this is something old story, yes. Because when Arabs from the very beginning of Islam, they carried out this mission, Islam mission, and go to Spain, Indonesia. So this clash from the very beginning. How those Arabs, they are primitive people. And they don't know anything. How can they dare?
Spain was saying that.
Yes, Spain. Yes. How can dare to go to Europe and to capture Spain? So that's in the mind of European people. That's strange, and that's maybe something strange for them and for Arabs. How those people who are simple people and they are uncivilized people also. This I think main point. The Arabs uncivilized people, they carried Islam, and Islam is Arab religion. In fact, this kind of misunderstanding Islam. Islam is not Arab. Islam for Arab people. Islam is universal religion. And according to what Allah told us, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. That is kind of the mission of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So the mind of European and the mind of Western scholars, they think, in fact, to imagine enemy, to be strong.
So Islam is the new demon.
Yes. Yes.
The new demon.
Yes.
Okay, well, if that's that, we all agree on this. We know, as Muslims, we know that Islam is comfortable in any culture and any country and in any civilization. Islam is happy there. It's for all people. It's not Arab. In fact, in the studio we have one Arab, an American, and a British, so people can see
at the same sitting.
In the same and not fighting with each other. But don't you agree with me, Doctor, that something has gone wrong somewhere? We've done something wrong as Muslims, maybe, that people, it can't be denied, people in Europe, for example, are afraid of Islam. Many people in Europe are afraid. When they hear the name of Prophet Muhammad, ﷺ, they're afraid.
Yes.
Where have we gone wrong? Is it our fault?
That's kind of propagation against Islam, because how the man in the street, in the West, he hears many things against Islam. Nothing in the favor of Islam. In the Western people, because they understand Islam as religion of violence, religion of fundamentalism, religion of terrorism, a religion of no coexistence between Muslims and non-Muslim. They say Muslims hate European civilization. They want to destroy this civilization. They also hate the scientific West, and also they contempt women, and so on. So this kind of ideas about Islam, I think, make the man in the street, European man, understand that Islam is horrible religion. Muslims are fanaticism people, and so on.
You see, in Switzerland, the referendum they held in Switzerland to ban the construction of minarets in the future, 57.5% of the Swiss people voted in favor of banning minarets. So in other words, 57.5% of Swiss people voted against Muslims.
Right.
Now the Grand Mufti of Egypt, Dr. Ali Goma, described that action as an insult to Muslims all over the world. How do we respond to such an insult? What do we do?
I think the matter is very important, because we must be serious about this kind of direction for Switzerland. Particularly, Switzerland is is not not like England or American or France or so, because it is bilateral country or not against, I mean
a neutral country.
Neutral country, not against the Muslims, not against their cases, and so that's strange in fact situation from Switzerland, but anyhow this kind of I mean minarets banning gives signal that Muslims are refused for in the West. Maybe that is also signal because they want to dispel Muslims out of Western countries. So we heard some other people like Mr. Velders, Holland,
in the Netherlands,
in Holland.
Yes.
They also why not also we make this kind for Quran and for minaret buildings, and so France also, some people we heard about that. So what's the reaction? Not only Switzerland now, maybe we should also expect that kind of this
animosity
position happen in the near future also from other European countries.
You know, there was something very interesting in the Middle Ages. They thought that garbage turned to rats, and they said, if you want my proof, come with me to the landfill. And they'd say, see, there's garbage. Well, look, there's a rat. So garbage turns to rats. I feel like some of this is the same when people see some things about Islam. For example, I remember there was a misconception that women walk behind the men as a sign of disrespect. Until I asked a Muslim, and he said, well, actually, in my country, it's a sign of we want to protect them, because usually if somebody's going to jump out, they're going to jump out at the first person they see, you know, from behind an alley, the way our city was set up. So we have them walk behind us. You know, but when the Western person sees that, for some reason, their mind goes to the worst case scenario. So if either one of you have any comments on that.
Well, it's misunderstanding.
Right.
It's complete misunderstanding. What I was going to say to Dr. Agindi, because we've just a short time in this section, following on from misunderstanding, what are we to do about it? How can we, what practical things can we do as Muslims? You know, it's easy to point fingers and they do this and they do this and they do that. But forget what they do. What can I do? What can we as Muslims do to dispel these misconceptions about Islam in the West? What practical things, what's our response? Or can all we do is just talk?
It is very important to give good examples about Islam. That's the main point. I mean Muslims. Because Islam in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. But how can we practice this? Muslims, they practice Islam. So I think the model now for us to practice Islam is not the real Islam. So that's a problem. Even in case of women, even in men in the street, our behavior with others, with non-Muslims, because sometimes we should recognize that misunderstanding also another people, I mean non-Muslims also. How those people...
So we misunderstand them as well.
Yes, also. Yeah, and we want also to make some kind of dialogue between us, I mean between Muslims and Muslims. Muslims and Muslims. Arab together. And the Arab with Muslims, and Muslims with Muslims.
Yes.
And also we should clarify the picture of women also, Muslim woman, I mean Muslim woman. So because that's kind of misunderstanding about Islam, and I think also if non-Muslims accuse the Muslims of many things, that's the problem here, that they have a right to accuse Muslims, but the problem now, they accuse Islam. That's the problem.
Instead of the people.
And makes a suspicion about Quran, suspicion about Sunnah, and I mean, Quran is innocent about this kind of, because that is Muslim, that's practical things happen for a Muslim. Maybe I am wrong I commit wrong act maybe, but that is not at the expense of Islam. That's my I mean personal
Yes.
behavior,
Yes.
not Islam. Everything that is Islam.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what you're suggesting is, if I understand, you're saying we should give a good example, but we should begin with each other.
Yes.
And Muslims, what we need as Muslims, we need a re-understanding, a reawakening of the real, true Islam.
Right.
Going back to the origins and the example of our beloved Prophet ﷺ, to the Quran, the Sunnah.
And we depend also about ourselves, because everything what I can say, can I say? I think everything we depend upon West. That's, I mean, Muslim countries. Let us recognize also this. Everything is even solutions. If I want to make solution about anything, what about Western people? How can behave about that? What is our opinion? What is our solutions? What is our ideas? What is our where our dogmas? I mean, real Islam. So I think this kind of problems facing Muslims.
I think in summary, what you're saying is every person should work on himself. Everybody else afterwards. Pretty much.
Conclusion is
Alhamdulillah, because we know that Isa alayhi salam actually said in the Quran in one verse, he's quoted as saying, reform yourself first.
Yes.
You know, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that if any believer finds some knowledge, he should hold on to it because he has a better right to it. And I remember reading one of the things that is reportedly from Confucius. He said that if there's peace in your heart, there'll be peace in your home. If there's peace in your home, there'll be peace in your village.
Yes.
And if there's peace in your village, there'll be peace in your country and then in the world.
Yes.
You know, so I think
start
we
with
can,
yourself.
Right.
That's the main point.
So I think we all have learned a valuable lesson, and we thank you for being here today. And we're going to take a short break right now. We'll be right back with, we'll go to some emails and take some questions from our audience, inshallah. So don't go anywhere. And we'll be right back. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So this is an open invitation for everybody to recognize God and enjoy His blessings in this life and His mercy in this life and in the hereafter as well. Allah, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. Each name has a meaning. Each name signifies a nature of Allah the Almighty which no one shares or is compared to Allah in it.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to our final segment of today's show. Let's talk. The topic we're discussing today is Islam and the West. Before we go any further, I would like to ask our studio audience if they have any questions related to the topic of Islam and the West. Before we get to our emails. Go ahead, brother.
Despite being a good religion, calling for tolerance, love, loyalty, faith, and so on, or etc. Why such a severe attack on Islam?
You mean from the media?
Yes, from the media.
Okay, Brother Idris.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. You know, I think that in the United Kingdom, for example, where I'm from, I've grown up seeing different groups being the butt of problems. I've seen the Sikh religion at one stage. They had problems in Britain. They were under Catholics at one stage were under the microscope. Now it's Islam. And at another stage it was Irish people. Now it's Islam. You know, I think we must be we use a lot of wisdom here and see exactly what is happening. You know, sensational news stories are what the papers want. If a bomb goes off and a car blows up, that makes headlines. Okay? But what doesn't make headlines is a grandmother teaching her granddaughter how to recite Quran. Okay? But a granddaughter teaches her granddaughter Quran much more often than a bomb going off. But because the bomb is more newsworthy, the bomb appears on the television. Now, if we extend that to all of Muslims, we could say the majority of Muslims, they're ordinary folk like you and I. You know, they're ordinary people going out to work, and they're good, honest people who pray 5 times a day. There are some situations, and we won't excuse them, but there are some countries that foreign armies have invaded them, and people are fighting against foreign invaders. There are some people who have a mixed-up idea of how to confront these attacks on Islam, and they blow themselves up. So there are things happening that are not good, but these are the things that are attracting attention. So I'd say there are 2 answers. One, Islam is the flavor of the month for attack at the moment. But when the media train moves on, they'll move on to someone else. You know, we shouldn't get disheartened about this. It happens to many groups. At the moment, it's Islam. But when they tire of Islam, they'll move to someone else. So that's one. And the other one is, you know, because sensation is what the media is about, they look for sensational stories that don't really reflect Islam at all. And they don't reflect Muslims at all. They're just going for something. If you just go on the road, you know, a road accident, there might be one road accident all day, and all the rest of the cars were just driving very sensibly. But on the news, it shows the road accident. So, again, a little bit of wisdom. The other thing that we can't deny is that there are some elements in the media that have it in for Islam and deliberately want to present a bad image of Islam and Muslims because it serves their political interests to do so. I think they're the 3 facets of the...
It's very funny that you were mentioning, I heard somebody's, you know, in the general idea or the general topic of discussing, you know, the average Muslim never gets reported. I heard someone, he made me laugh one time, he said, but how funny would it be if one day you're flipping through and you watch CNN, right, and you see just an ordinary story, a guy in Iran, you know, my name's Muhammad, I'm just baking cookies, and that's it. That'd be very nice. Do we have any other questions from our audience?
Yeah.
Go ahead, brother.
I want to ask, how can we correct the bad misconception about Islam?
Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. One way is programs like this. You know, programs like this. We come on the show, hopefully we present a good image of ourselves and of Islam, and people from all over the world can watch the show. Inshallah, there are non-Muslims watching. There are Muslims from different countries in the world. So that's one way we can do it. Certainly, from what the people in the streets said, it's by living good lives and living as good Muslims we can do it. We can't change the world, but we can change the impression of the man next door, or we can change the impression of someone we email in a foreign country, or who we're chatting to on the internet. We can do it that way. We can try and involve ourselves in so many things, conferences, and we can write, we can send letters to the editor of newspapers. Because the world is so small now, you know, we don't need to write a letter. We can email the editor of wherever, and the more emails they get, they'll sit up and pay attention. So there are many, many, many things we can do. Certainly involving ourselves with people of other faiths, discussing dialogue. Dialogue's very important. And trying to give this impression, this true impression, to people who are not Muslim of what Islam is really like. So slowly, by small steps, we can go a long way, I think.
Jazakallah khair for that very thought-provoking answer, Brother Idris. I believe we have one more question from our audience.
Yes,
Go
I
ahead,
want
brother.
to add something more important. A more important means of changing or reshaping our image, our Islamic image for the West or the Western people is our behavior. To change our behavior first, and then we can change our image. As Allah says in the Quran, the verse which teaches, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Whenever we change ourselves, the world will change with us.
MashaAllah. Do you have any thoughts on that, or should we go right into the emails?
That's absolutely correct.
I think that sums it up very nicely.
Hit the nail on the head.
So we have an email from Rita Muhammad from Damascus. The question is, how can we as Muslims spread the message of peace in our own societies when we're living in a world that tends to be very violent these days?
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. You know, Islam, we all know that Islam comes from an Arabic root word that means 2 things. It means submission and peace. Islam is a religion of peace. We greet one another with Assalamu alaikum. Okay, but we live as the Brother Reda says, we live in a very violent world, and often because life is hard, we become aggressive and violent ourselves. Not with bombs, but just the way we speak to each other. You know, often we use very harsh words talking to our children, talking to our wives or our husbands. We use very harsh words. As Muslims, we need to calm down and fight, live. We've had it all along. Good example, good behavior. We need to find that peace that Islam brings to us. And a good way I learnt a way of calming down. And that's when anyone asks me anything. And, I've done some interviews on the TV, and the people have been really harsh.
Really?
They've been really trying to catch Islam out. And I've discovered that an excellent way of going into it is by saying, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And it calms you down. Just listen. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It calms you down. As Muslims, we should use these little things. Islam gives us gifts. We enter a room, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We do things, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And it gives us time. They're gifts to us to help us live as good Muslims. So we can bring peace to our society by allowing ourselves to calm down. Don't get excited. Don't immediately respond to things with the way the world responds. We're Muslims. Respond in a peaceful way. But we need to find peace in our hearts first.
MashaAllah. Okay, we have time for one more email. Brother Kamal from Manchester is saying that most Muslims don't appear on television programs, so how can we as ordinary Muslims get involved in the media?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Very simply, these are very ordinary, good Muslim boys. They're on the television now. Most young people would say, I'll never be on the television. You can be. Let's remind everyone now of our email, talk@huda.tv. That's the email for the show. One of the things you can do, brothers and sisters, if you live nearby, email us and join the audience. That's one way you can get involved. You can also get involved in media by writing things for websites. There are many, many interesting websites, Islamic websites you can write for. There are many blogs on all sorts of Facebook and Twitter and all of these things. We can all add our very decent, clean, honest, polite behavior to these sites. We needn't mention Islam at first. Just introduce ourselves as a polite, well-behaved person. And then begin slowly, shwaya, to talk about Islam. No need to throw Islam at people who aren't interested. Do it very slowly, very gently. This is how we can get involved. And we need good young Muslims like this, and good Muslims all over the world to involve themselves in media by taking small steps. We're here.
Right.
I never imagined when I was a kid I'd be on TV. Did you?
No, not at all. Yeah.
So we're very ordinary people.
Right.
So ordinary people get involved in all of these things. They're not extraordinary. They're just tools to speak to people.
MashaAllah. Well, that's all the time we have for today. We hope to see you next time on Let's Talk. It was a very wonderful show. Had a very interesting guest, very interesting questions from the audience. I really had a great time, and we thank you for joining us. And we will see you next time, inshallah ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high, and you want to smile but you have to sigh, when care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but do not ever quit. Success is a failure turned inside out. Let's talk and clear the clouds of doubt. Success is a failure turned inside out. Let's talk and clear the